I inherited a cursed cabin in British Columbia. 7 sinister rules were revealed to me. Sarah gripped the steering wheel tighter as the narrow gravel road twisted deeper into the Canadian wilderness. She could still hear her son, Jake, excitedly pointing out the sights outside their car windows, but all Sarah felt was dread. Having inherited this cabin from an uncle she barely remembered, she had hoped for a fresh start away from the chaos of California, but the remote woods whispered secrets she wasn't ready to hear. As they parked beside the cabin, the structure loomed before them creaky, weathered, and surrounded by trees that seemed too thick, too alive. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows that clawed at the ground. "I senti it beautiful, Mom?" Jake's voice pulled her from her thoughts. But where Jake saw charm, Sarah felt a cold dread creep in. The woods felt like they were watching, waiting. That first night was deceptively peaceful, the winds whispering through the trees. But as darkness settled in, the tranquility became oppressive. Flickers of shadows danced past the windows, too quick to trust, and the woods seemed to echo with unseen voices. Dismissing Jake's nervous chatter about the whispers just outside, Sarah convinced herself it was just the stress of the move. "You'll get used to it," she assured him. But even her own words felt hollow. During the day, Jake explored the cabin and its oddities, rummaging through forgotten relics. That's when he found the dusty box, its lid barely clinging on. "Hey, Mom, check this out," he called, his voice breaking the eerie silence. Inside were 7 handwritten rules. Never approach the woods after dark. Do not trust your neighbors, and most foreboding of all, do not speak the name of the lost ones. Jake dismissed the rules as silly family traditions, but the hairs on the back of Sarah's neck stood up as days passed. Strange occurrences began to plague their quiet life. Shadows stalked the corners of their vision, and the temperature would drop suddenly, as if the very air around them had senses. A creeping unease pooled in Sarah's chest, squeezing tighter each night. Every creak in the cabin sent her heart racing, and every gust of wind felt like a warning. Jake's playful spirit began to dim, his laughter replaced by stilted silence. Then one night, everything changed. Sarah heard Jake's frantic plea echo from the living room. "Mom, come quick!" Racing to him, she was stunned to find only the empty room. The box now opened, its sinister rules scattered like fallen leaves. Panic surged through her. What had happened here? She gathered the papers, her hands trembling, but when she looked into the stillness of the dark, shadows shifted again, and she felt eyes upon her. Before she could rationalize away the fear, a desperate sound cut through the oppressive silence. "Mom, you have to listen," Jake whispered from behind her, his voice thick with terror. But there was no one there. The weight of the rules pressed on her conscience, and with every flicker of the outside power, the secrets of the woods clawed closer. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue. That very night, the power went out completely, plunging them into suffocating darkness. Sarah stood at the window, her chest tightening with fear, as she gazed into the depths of the woods. The moon flickered through the trees, illuminating an unmarked path that seemed to beckon her forward. The shadows there danced more wildly, teasing her. "Mom, don't go." Jake's voice shot through her like a bullet as she hesitated, glancing back toward him. But the pull of that shadowy figure slipping into the trees was too potent. Suddenly, everything shifted. The last rule echoed in her mind like thunder, and she realized with a sick weight in her stomach that they had stumbled into something hollow. What exactly were the lost ones, and how deep did their roots run into the heart of this cursed cabin? As the shadows closed in around her, she knew she had to stand her ground. Or would they dissolve into the whispers of legend, just another tale of terror traded between wary townsfolk? The air turned icy, tightening its grip around Sarah. The shadows pulsated with a life of their own, twisting and curling around her legs like sinister hands. She felt Jake's small presence behind her, the warmth of his body an anchor to her reality. But the darkness called to her, seductive and filled with promises she could not decipher. "Stay close," she snapped, fearing the shadows might lure him away. But fear chipped at her confidence. She clutched Jake's hand, feeling his quickened pulse flutter against her own. "What did you hear?" she whispered, staying rooted in place by the window. "Mom, I saw someone." Jake's voice trembled. "I swear. In the woods. They looked like shadows. Should just stay quiet." Her heart drummed wildly, each beat echoing the warnings from the rules. She wanted to dismiss his fears, but the contradicting evidence made her skin crawl. What if Jake was right? The rule about the lost ones taunted her, lingering in her mind like a bitter taste. Suddenly, the wind howled past the cabin, pulling at the door with monstrous force. Sarah turned toward the sound, gripping Jake's hand tighter. The old wooden door creaked, straining against invisible hands. Then, a figure stepped into the moonlight outside, just beyond the threshold of the trees. Disfigured and warped, it appeared almost human, but the angles were wrong. The body slumped as if gravity had given up on it. Through her rising panic, Sarah squinted, her breath hitching in her throat. "Mom, it's coming. We have to leave. Now." Jake pulled at her, voice breaking. "Not yet. I need to see." Just as she finished her sentence, the figure, now eerily close, lifted its head, a soft whisper spilling forth in a language that twisted her stomach. It spoke her name, a dry rasp that sent tendrils of fear spiraling through her veins. "Sarah." She staggered back, forcing herself to break eye contact. If it was one of the lost ones, she couldn't engage. "Stay inside," she ordered, backing away closer to the door, every instinct telling her to protect her son. But then the whispering came again, insistent and melodic. It filled the cabin, weaving through the very walls of their sanctuary, seducing her with sweet promises. "You remember, don't you?" Suddenly, all at once, memories washed over her, images not hers flooding her mind. Dark nights, laughter echoing through the trees, shadows licking at her heels, while she ran, helpless and alone. A family gathering, her uncle's face twisted in horror as he spoke the names she could not remember. Rousing from her thoughts, urgency clawed at her throat as she looked around. The cabin now felt like a cage. The whispers grew louder, vibrating against the wood. Panic surged in her chest, and she fumbled to close the window, blocking out the seductive voice. "Mom, what did they say?" Jake's eyes were wide, reflecting his fear back at her. "I don't know, honey." She fought to steady her breathing, the urge to flee mounting within her. "We can't stay here." But as she turned, the air in front of her trembled. Something was materializing right there in the corner of the room, a faint silhouette, pale and flickering like a dying candle, emerging from the very wall. The shadows were not just outside. They were creeping in, and then the lights flickered back on, revealing the living room's unsettling normality. Yet the shadows still lingered, almost watching her with hungry anticipation. They were waiting for her to make the next move. "Run!" she shouted without thinking, gripping Jake's hand as they darted toward the exit. In that moment, she realized, they weren't just cursed. They were the very reason for the curse. As they dashed out the door, the woods felt alive again, the voices rising into a cacophony of screams and laughter, drowning out her frantic thoughts. But one thing became clear. The path to safety was far dimmer than the one leading deeper into the woods. With shadows chasing them, a horrifying truth clawed at her heart. Leaving might not mean escaping. Just as they reached the tree-line, the ground trembled, pulling away from beneath their feet. In the chaos, Sarah felt a sinister gaze lock onto them from the depths of the night, and she realized, a little too late, that the rules were only the beginning of their reckoning. What if they were meant to return? What if the lost ones craved a different kind of company? The woods swallowed them whole, darkness wrapping around Sarah and Jake like a living shroud. Each step forward felt heavier than the last. The shadows loomed behind them, their whispers a demonic serenade that twisted inside Sarah's mind, urging her to recall things she feared to remember. Fear drove them deeper, but the lay of the terrain felt familiar, unnaturally so. "Mom, where are we going?" Jake's voice trembled, barely cutting through the rustling leaves and snapping twigs that crunched under their feet. Just keep moving." It was all Sarah could say, her heart hammering like a war drum. Something was wrong more than the shadows chasing them. She could sense it in her bones, a malevolence that hummed like electricity through the air. The moon struggled to pierce through the thick branches, casting ghostly outlines on the forest floor. A chill crept down her spine. It reminded her of something. A memory she couldn't fully grasp, something lost and desperately close. But the more she tried to focus, the more chaotic the thoughts became. "Mom, look," Jake pointed, eyes wide with terror. Ahead of them, the tree line opened into a small clearing. In the moonlight, a twisted figure waited, a duplicate of what they had seen at the cabin. More than just a memory, more than a lost one. It flickered in and out of existence, like a cruel photograph fading and reappearing in waves. "Step back, Jake." She pushed him behind her, stepping forward instinctively. "Sarah," the figure whispered again, its voice rich with dark intimacy. "You always wanted to know." "No," she screamed, desperate to drown it out. But Jake's hold on her loosened, curiosity constricting his instincts. Before Sarah could seize him, he bolted toward the silhouette, driven by a force she did not understand. "Jake!" The moment tethering him snapped as Jake reached the phantom. It seemed to absorb him, pulling him deeper into the shadows it wanted him. Sarah rushed forward, heart in her throat. She grasped at her son, a raw sense of urgency slicing through the air, but her hands passed through the figure as if it were smoke. Jake's laughter rang out, a cheerful peal, stark against the looming terror. "Mom, come play." "Jake, no." Panic clawed at her, sending waves of dread crashing over her. She lunged once more, desperate but falling short. The figure morphed, shifting and swirling, transforming into something far more ghastly, a grotesque shape mimicking the contours of her son's face, now twisted with joy. "Join us. Join the fun, Sarah," it crooned, voice dripping with innocence yet tinged with malice. "No." She stumbled back, fighting through the haze of remembered warmth and laughter, the shadows gnashing at her heels. They were here to tempt, to ensnare enticing Jake with the allure of unfulfilled wishes and twisted joy. "Mom, come on," Jake urged in that same troubling tone, now echoing deeper, more like a siren song than her son's voice. "Stay away from him," Sarah roared, breaking against the chilling grasp of panic. She took off toward the shadows, knowing she had to save Jake from whatever dark magic threatened to take him. But the more she ran, the more the landscape shifted, the trees twisted unnaturally. The ground beneath her seemed to collapse. She could feel the energy pulsating, dark and alive. She screamed Jake's name, praying against hope that this wasn't the end. Then she felt it, the cold breath of 1,000 whispers swirling above her, enveloping her whole as the figure disbanded into a cloud of shadow and mist, revealing a new path ahead. But the only light flickered like hope on the horizon, drew her into the unknown, and warned of horrors she had no choice but to face. If she followed it, if she chose this path, what would become of Jake? With the shadows crawling closer and the echo of the lost ones calling, her resolve hardened. She had to choose. "Mom, hurry!" Jake's distant voice echoed from below, luring her back to a chilling choice. As she descended into the heart of darkness, one question hung in the air. Was she chasing him, or were they both being hunted? The shadows thickened around Sarah as she raced forward, her breath ragged. The light she had glimpsed flickered, taunting her, wavering like a candle in a storm. The forest was alive and angry. As she plunged deeper, the ground seemed to vibrate under her feet, teasing her with the echoes of the past. "Jake!" she gasped, straining her ears to catch a hint of his laughter, but it dissolved into the wind. Panic clawed at her chest, and for a moment, she hesitated, darkness curling at her ankles, whispering promises of safety in return for her surrender. but she couldn't. She wouldn't. Deep within, a flame flickered, instilling urgency. "We will find each other," she declared, both to herself and the shadows. Her voice steady despite the tremors coursing through her limbs. Just ahead, she spotted an outline. A figure trembled in the distance, one that looked like Jake, yet felt so wrong. No, the shadows were trying to deceive her, to manipulate her deepest fears. "Stay away," she cried out, forcing her legs to move again, even as the ground seemed to pull back. The forest sighed, a deep breath resonating through the trees, and the air hung thick with anticipation. With each step, the whispers grew clearer. They weren't just taunts. They were memories of her mother, long forgotten. Images flooded her mind. The old cabin, the way her mother used to sing when the storm raged outside. "Come home," they whispered, a sinister chorus mingling with the night, all voices urging her to turn back. "Mom!" Jake's voice broke through, piercing the veil of confusion. She sprinted toward it, fighting against the grip of despair. "I'm coming." A heartbeat later, one of the twisted trees whipped a branch at her, almost striking her down. She dodged, her instincts screaming. "Stop!" She yelled at the shadows, not caring if they understood. She wouldn't be their pawn. But the forest conspired against her. She lost her footing, tumbling into a small ravine concealed beneath a tangle of roots. Landing hard, she gasped, her ribs screaming in protest. As the pain surged, she glanced around, grim determination replacing fear. There was no going back now. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. They curled around her mind like ivy, suffocating and ever-present. "Join us. We only want to help." "No," Sarah yelled, squeezing her eyes shut. Every memory, every specter she had buried surged forth. Images of family gatherings morphing into twisted nightmares played in her mind, fear lacing nostalgia. It became unbearable. "You're not real." Over the edge of the ravine, shadows flickered, bleeding into her surroundings. And then she heard it again, a giggle, high and sweet. It was Jake's laughter, tinged with something terrible. "Mom! Help!" he cried again, an echo of desperation that broke her heart. She climbed out of the ravine, aching and tired, but she had no time for weakness. "I'm coming," Sarah vowed, her fight igniting anew. The ground spurted mud underfoot as she reached for the light, the flicker that seemed so near yet always eluded her. But then came a rustle, followed by the whisper of something huge and indescribable. The presence loomed just outside her vision, something primal and dark. Shadows danced at the corners of her mind, spinning tales woven from her own fears. Just as she thought she spotted a flicker of hope, her foot barely caught a root, sending her tumbling backward. She hit the ground hard, breath knocked from her lungs. The forest seemed to feed off her pain, laughter echoing in its depths. Sarah, that voice deep and filled with longing. It was a voice she both recognized and dreaded. "Stop! Leave him alone!" She clutched at her chest, feeling the pulse of terror, the weight of her own helplessness clawing at her throat. But the thick, choking fog began to swirl around her, heartbeats faltering, and shadows converging, blocking her breath. The lights streaked away into darkness, swallowing her last shred of hope as the void enclosed her. A chilling question slipped from the silence. "What will you sacrifice to reclaim your son?" In that moment, she realized something: her most pressing fear might not simply be losing Jake, but losing herself entirely. The darkness pressed in close, a weight that suffocated her thoughts. Sarah struggled to breathe, each gasping inhale interrupted by the overwhelming dread that twisted like a blade in her chest. What could she possibly give up to save Jake? "Jake!" she shouted into the encroaching shadows, desperation clawing at her throat. No response. Only the sinister creaks and groans of the forest echoed back, mocking her futile calls. The air grew heavy, pregnant with unease. The whispers returned, curling around her limbs like serpents. "Join us. What do you fear?" they taunted, their voices no longer a mere rustle, but a deep, resonating hum that seemed to vibrate through the ground. "Get away from me!" She roared, panic igniting her will. She staggered to her feet, fumbling against the damp earth. Felt wrong, too soft, too unstable. Her heart thundered, each beat a frantic reminder that time was slipping away. A flicker of light caught her eye again. Farther away, flickering in and out like a distant star. Was it real, or just another trick of the forest? She wanted to believe it was real, but doubt gnawed at her sanity. Every step felt like a leap into the unknown, yet the pull of hope yanked her forward. Sarah pushed through thorny undergrowth, wincing as branches dug into her skin. The light pulsed ahead, beckoning her closer. A form began to emerge from the shadows, feminine and ethereal, swaying gently as if caught in a breeze. "Help me find him," she whispered seductively, her voice a melodic chime. "Mom?" The hope surged like a tide in Sarah's chest as she stumbled forward. But hesitation flickered at the edges, an intuitive warning drowning in the murky shadows. This was not the mother she remembered. This was a wraith sculpted from her fears. "Mom, is that you?" she asked, voice trembling. "Come, my dear." The figure extended a pale hand, a smile that didn't reach her hollow eyes. "Yes, close. Join me and you shall have him back. Forever. No more pain." A throbbing pain erupted in Sarah's chest. A part of her longed to connect, to hold on to what she had lost. But the air crackled with darkness. She remembered the sacrifices whispered through the forest. The trees were witnesses, hungry for offerings. "Stay away from my son," she screamed, cutting through the shadows with conviction. "I will not become part of this." The wraith recoiled, but her laughter filled the clearing with chilling glee. "Will you embrace the darkness, Sarah? To save him, you must pay the price." Something shifted in the air, and the laughter morphed into wails, the cries of countless others, lost souls trapped by the forest's curse. Each scream tugged at Sarah's heart, reminding her of all that was at stake. Jake's laughter morphed into sobs, wrenching her soul. "Mom! Help!" A guttural roar erupted from the shadows, echoing off the trees. Something huge moved just beyond her field of vision, snapping branches like dry twigs. Sarah's heart raced, thumping wildly as if trying to break free from her chest. She needed to make a choice. The forest rippled with anticipation. "What will you sacrifice?" it whispered, the voices melding into a cacophony that made her skin crawl. Without thinking, she screamed, "I'll fight," as a wave of defiance surged within her. In that very moment, the shadows stirred violently, and she felt the ground shift. The trees leaned in closer, breathing a distorted, foreboding silence. "Then know this, only one can leave this plane." The shadows coiled tighter. Suddenly, a blinding light burst through the darkness, illuminating the clearing, revealing the truth of the forest's curse. A reflection, a glimpse of what lay hidden. As Sarah shielded her eyes, she caught a glimpse of Jake, trapped in a shroud of shadows just beyond the light's reach. "Mom, don't!" he cried as the moment stretched into eternity. The glimmer dimmed, leaving only the suffocating darkness behind. Sarah felt the ground shake violently beneath her. The question loomed like the edge of a falling cliff. Would she sacrifice everything to save her son, or witness his descent into damnation? And through the darkness, she heard the ground whisper once more, "Only one can escape, choose wisely." The ground trembled beneath Sarah's feet, a wild thrum that resonated through her bones. Something sinister was awakening in the forest. The shadows shifted, writhing like angry serpents, closing in on her. Panic clawed at her throat, choking off her breaths. "Jake!" The name escaped her lips in a desperate gasp. Each syllable echoed, swallowed by the oppressive night. The darkness felt alive, a sentient beast that hungered for her fear. It coiled around her, dragging her senses into its depths. Her heart pounded a steady rhythm now layered with dread. The fractured terrain beneath her shifted, revealing roots twisted like skeletal fingers reaching for her ankles. She stumbled back, the whispering voices filling her mind. "What are you willing to give up?" They slithered through her thoughts, slick and seductive. "Get away," she shouted, her words barely cutting through the clamor of lost souls. The air thickened with despair as branches creaked ominously overhead, their movements mimicking sinister laughter. The wraith-like figure from before hovered on the edges of her mind, taunting her with false promises. The blinding light had shown her glimpses of hope, but now it felt like a cruel trick. Was Jake really there, or just a figment of her fraying sanity? The trees loomed closer, their bark gnarled and twisted, like ancient sentinels bearing witness to an unspeakable horror. She pressed forward, fueled by a mix of love and fear. Each step reverberated with Jake's cries, haunting melodies reverberating in her heart. But the darkness grew bolder, snatching at her legs, attempting to draw her down into its ink-black abyss. Suddenly, a burst of sound, the crack of a branch splintering. Sarah whirled around, scanning the dim forest. A monstrous shadow shifted between the trees, monstrous eyes glowing in the dark like fiery coals. This was not the forest she once knew. Felt like a net closing around her. "Mom!" Jake cried again, desperation lacing his voice. The sound cleaved through the suffocating dread, filling her with fierce resolve. "I'm coming!" she screamed, a battle cry against the darkness that surrounded her. With renewed strength, she charged towards the haunting voice of her son, dodging the grasping tendrils of shadow. But as she vaulted forward, the ground beneath her crackled ominously. A low growl thrummed through the earth, reverberating unervingly within her bones. She could almost feel the ancient power of the forest, vibrating with malevolence. Would it accept her sacrifice, or would it claim her soul too? Ahead, a clearer light flickered through the trees. Hope ignited within her, fierce and relentless. She could see silhouettes moving ahead, figures ducking and weaving like phantoms in a twisted dance. In the distance, Jake's cries crescendoed, urging her on. "Mom, help me, please." But from behind her, the monstrous shadow surged, its presence suffocating and wild. The growl intensified, pulsating with the violence of a predator, demanding to take hold of her fears. What could she give up? What needed to be sacrificed? The whispers cried out, pleading for blood, for suffering, for her very spirit. Just as she reached for the light, shadows erupted from the ground, encircling her with daunting ferocity. Desperation clawed at her throat. She hadn't realized how close they were until it was too late. With one last gasp, Sarah flung herself towards the flickering glow. "Jake!" she called, her voice cracking under the weight of her choices. And in that moment, the ground beneath split open, unveiling a void darker than night. "Join us," the voices called, seductive, resounding through the chaos. Only one can escape. As Sarah fell, fear clawed at her insides. She had to decide, would she embrace the darkness to save her son, or lose herself in the depths of despair? It was then she felt the shadows reaching for her, longing to consume. In that split second, she made a choice, but was it the right one? Sarah plunged into the void, her heart racing, a cocktail of dread and resolve swirling within her. The darkness spun around her like a tempest, the whispers intensifying, clawing at her thoughts. "You can't escape your fate," they hissed, their voices dripping with malice, each syllable sharp enough to cut. But just before despair swallowed her whole, a glimmer pierced the void. That light, the flickering hope of her son. It beckoned to her, brighter than the encroaching shadows, promising safety, warmth. It seemed to slip through her fingers like sand, tantalizingly close yet distant. "Jake!" she screamed again, her voice strained, reverberating through the swirling depths around her. Would it reach him? Would he hear her? The air shifted. Suddenly, she landed with a bone-jarring thud on cold, hard earth. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs. Stars exploded in her vision, blinding her momentarily. When she blinked them away, she was no longer in the depths of despair but stood on the edge of the forest, a gnarled tree looming above her like a twisted guardian. The whispers softened, retreating but relentless, still entwined in her mind. "One must pay the price," they sang. Sarah pressed her palms against her temples, struggling to fight them off. She could feel it, an unsettling energy crackling in the air in front of her. The eerie glow continued to pulse, and after a heartbeat, she took a tentative step forward. Her breath was shallow, nervous. With each movement, the ground beneath her felt alive, as though it held its own secrets, thrumming with an otherworldly vibration. Jake! Panic surged within her again. She stumbled deeper into the forest, the shadows now curling around her ankles, trying to pull her back again. The chilling chorus of tree branches creaking above filled the air, creating a cacophony of dread. Was she alone? The thought pressed against her, heavy and suffocating. Then she heard it, the unmistakable sound of a child's laughter. It echoed around her, jarring against the shadows, a stark contrast that made her skin prickle. "Mom! Over here!" Jake's voice was light, yet there was an undercurrent, a warning she couldn't quite grasp. "What have you done?" she whispered, horrified by the thought. She could feel the cool brush of the shadows creeping back, punctuated with temptation. "Mom!" The laughter grew louder, inviting yet sinister. The way it twisted made her stomach churn. The light flickered through the trees, illuminating a clearing just ahead. She stumbled towards it, heart hammering, her breaths quickening. As she broke through the foliage, she was met with an unsettling sight. There was Jake, standing tall with an outstretched arm, his face illuminated by an unnatural glow. But the innocent boy she remembered was gone. His eyes sparkled not with life, but with something darker, something that chilled her core. "Mom, you came!" he exclaimed, but the words slithered into the air like smoke, laden with something cruel. "We have a game to play." "Jake, no!" Sarah reached for him, desperation clawing at her throat. The shadows behind him writhed eagerly, anticipating the chaos that would unfold. "That's not you." Laughter erupted again, deeper this time, reverberating through the clearing. The joy in his voice sent shockwaves through her, twisting warmth into dread. But it felt familiar, the sound of childhood joy, tainted in a way that sent chills down her spine. She took another step closer, feeling the ground shift under her feet. "What are you?" she demanded, fighting against the tide of fear washing over her. "This isn't who you are." Jake's grin widened. "Wanna play hide and seek? You have to find me before the sun goes down." His smile darkened, the air thickening, wrapping around her like a vice. With a sudden realization, she understood. This game carried a dangerous rule, the one she'd have to figure out. And with that, he slipped back, surrounding himself with looming shadows. The growl returned, a deep resonance echoing off the trees. "Only one can escape, make your choice," whispered the shadows. Sarah's heart raced as the clearing darkened. The clock was ticking. Could she outwit the night and save her son? Or would she sacrifice everything to reveal the truth? Her voice trembled. "I'll do anything to get you back." And as if sensing her resolve, the shadows rippled, laughing. Then let the hunt begin. Her pulse quickened. What had she unleashed? The air around her pulsated with expectancy. Time was not on her side, and the forest thickened around her, waiting. "How far will you go to save him?" The whisper wrapped around her as darkness swirled, sealing her fate. The shadows swallowed Sarah whole, twisting her world into a blur of indistinct shapes. She felt the ground pulse beneath her feet, vibrating with an eerie beat. Each thud echoed like a tick of a clock, counting down moments she didn't have. "Jake!" she called again, desperation clawing at her throat, her voice barely audible above the whispering winds that seemed to consume her. A rustle broke the silence, a flicker in the periphery. She turned sharply, catching a glimpse of a familiar silhouette darting behind a nearby tree. Jake? No, it didn't feel right. It merged with the shadows, almost as if it were teasing her with its proximity, daring her to pursue. The laughter echoed once more, distorted and teasing. "Come find me, Mom." His words danced through her mind, a siren-esque song leading her deeper into the haunted woods. Sarah shook her head, willing herself to understand. She had to tread carefully. Each step felt like a gamble against unseen forces. She took a breath and plunged after the sound, branches clawing at her arms as the darkness thickened, wrapping its cool fingers around her. The way Jake had spoken chilled her more than the biting cold air, spiking her pulse to a frantic rhythm. This was no simple game. It felt like she was being hunted, each turn a submissive invitation into a trap. "Jake!" she shouted, each cry driven by the promise of safety, every syllable chased into the void. The laughter morphed into an agonizing crescendo, swells of twisted innocence that sent daggers through her heart. Then silence. An oppressive stillness flooded the air, so thick it pressed against her chest. For an agonizing moment, she stood still, listening. In the quiet that followed, her breath hitched. Something was watching her. She could feel it, the weight of predatory eyes piercing through the darkness. "Mommy," the voice crooned, silky and dark. It was Jake's voice, but layered with something sinister. "Why are you hiding? You need to find me before they do." The dread clawed at her again, a more visceral terror anchoring her feet. She fought against the urge to flee, to run away from this nightmare. In that heartbeat of hesitation, the ground beneath her feet trembled again, but this time it brought a different wake of horror. Shapes, dark forms climbing up from the earth, twisting and writhing. "No," she gasped, instinctively taking a step back. The darkness seemed to pulse with excitement. "You don't want to begin the game?" it taunted, a menacing whisper that sent ice through her veins. Sarah steeled herself, piecing together a vicious plan. If she had to play this game, she would play by her own rules. "Where are you hiding?" she called out, her voice steadier now. "I'll find you, Jake. I'm behind you," came a breathy response, an echo of her son's laughter dancing around her. Her heart leaped into her throat. She spun around, and in the brief flash of her adrenaline-fueled impulse, she faced the shadows. But it was worse than she imagined. There he stood, Jake, eyes gleaming with malevolence, flanked by monstrous figures, hunched and grotesque monsters that clung to the edges of reality, each one a mere outline of nightmare. "Mommy, come play," he whispered again, but this time it bristled with unfathomable darkness. And in that moment, Sarah felt panic clawing its way back up her throat, choking her resolve. How far could she go before becoming part of their wicked game? How much of herself was she willing to lose? "Let him go," she shouted, the words exploding from her mouth with a raw intensity. But the shadows only stirred, the ground trembling in a prelude of chaos. "You're too late, Sarah. You're already playing." The darkness thickened, wrapping around her limbs like shackles, pulling her closer to the edge of the abyss. And as she felt the tendrils of despair dragging her down, a terrifying realization dawned upon her. This was only the beginning, and the true horror of the game yet lay ahead. With her heartbeat echoing her fear, she whispered into the void, "What has become of my son?" And the forest whispered back, "Would you trade your soul against theirs?" As the shadows loomed, twisting and turning, Sarah understood that the stakes were rising, and the hunt for her son had just begun. The air crackled like static, making the hairs on Sarah's arms stand up. The monstrous figures, once mere outlines, began to take form, their faces contorted into expressionless masks of horror. Jake's laughter twined with the darkness, a melody steeped in malice that echoed through the trees, bouncing off their gnarled branches like a haunting symphony. "Mommy," Jake's voice was tainted, each syllable dripping with something darker. "You're not afraid, are you?" Sarah's heart pounded, a relentless drum that threatened to drown out her thoughts. She had to fight. She had to break the illusion. With every ounce of strength she could muster, she demanded, "This is not you, Jake. Fight it." The twisted figures shifted, their bodies bending in unnatural ways. They whispered in raspy tones that churned her stomach, a cacophony rising to a fever pitch. "No one fights us. You're too far gone." As they closed in, she could feel the chill sink deeper into her bones, a numbing cold that felt alive, biting at her resolve. Panic clawed at her throat once more, the shadows overwhelming her senses. She stumbled back, desperately scanning the darkness for anything that resembled her son, or at least a trace of the boy she knew. "I can hear you, Mommy." The voice came again, softer, trickling through the air like poison. "I'm not far. You just need to see." "See what?" She cried out, her voice shaky. I can't play this game. The game is already playing you, the shadows hissed, drawing closer. It feeds on your fear. It craves your despair. Sarah's instincts kicked in, flashing images of the cabin, the ink-black woods surrounding it, the warnings she had dismissed. A chill crept up her spine, twisting her gut further. The rules, what were the rules? There was something she had to remember. Wasn't there a way to fight them? A flicker caught her eye, a glimmer of light far ahead. Jake! She shouted, desperation waking her legs into action. She sprinted through the darkness, dodging grasping branches, feeling the breath of the shadows trailing her. Mommy! The call broke through, closer now. But as she ran, she realized what Jake was losing. The innocence. The boy she loved was fading, consumed by whatever lay beyond those grotesque forms. Step into the light, they screeched, their voices rising in a horrible crescendo, fingers stretching toward her with blackened claws. No escape for you. She burst through a sudden clearing, breathless, her heart hammering as she was momentarily freed from the shadows. The light illuminated a circle of charred earth, a stark contrast against the shadowy forest. Pulsed, alive. In its center stood a grotesque altar, its surface slick and glistening with an unknown substance. Jake! She called again, desperate and raw. Where are you? The shadows withdrew, forming a wall that edged closer, ready to swallow her whole again. She felt their weight pushing against her, a tide threatening to drag her back under. She had to choose. She had to find her son. In the center of the altar lay something small, round. A doll with dulled colors, eyes wide and empty, as if waiting to be filled. Was this his? Take it. The shadows roared in unison, the darkness shifting as if they were urging her forward. But something shifted inside her. Deep down, she knew this was not just a game. It was a choice, a bargain she would refuse to make. No, she screamed, stepping away from the altar, ready to break free once and for all. She would not lose him to this evil. But the shadows laughed, a chorus of malevolence echoing through the clearing. You cannot resist the game forever, Sarah. The darkness wants you both. The light flickered, and for a moment, Sarah felt hope, a thread unfurling in her chest. But before she could grasp it, the shadows surged. Will you save him, or let him be consumed? The question hung in the air like a guillotine, each moment stretching to infinity as Sarah realized she had just descended into the depths of a nightmare. As the ground quaked beneath her feet, she braced herself against the inevitable. Would she be forced to make a sacrifice that could seal their fates? A final thought skittered across her mind. What if her own life was part of the cost? She clenched her fists, the chill wrapping tighter around her. And in that heavy silence, a decision awaited, one that could ignite the fire for hope, or extinguish it forever. Choose, Sarah, the shadows whispered, their eyes glimmering like dark stars. But in that choice resided the truth of the game's ultimate terror, and the emergence of something far worse than mere shadows. The darkness throbbed, poised to swallow her whole. An oppressive weight hung heavy in the air, waiting for her answer, waiting for her surrender. The twisted faces of shadows surrounded her, a cacophony of sinister laughter echoing in her ears. Choose, they hissed, beckoning her into their cold embrace. Will you save your son, or will you become just another whisper in the night? Heart-pounding, Sarah sank to her knees. Memories of Jake flooded her mind, his first steps, his unrestrained laughter, the warmth of his small body curled against her in the dark. Those were moments she would give anything to reclaim. Jake, she cried, her voice rising above the whispers. I won't give up on you. I refuse to let you go. The shadows recoiled for just a moment, surprised by the fierceness of her defiance. But then they surged forward, closing in and tightening their grip. You are losing him, Sarah. The game has already begun. Only one can escape. She felt it, the truth of their words creeping into her veins, a paralyzing panic clawing at her insides. What if she was too late? What if Jake was already lost? No, she shouted with tears streaming down her cheeks. Fractured memories swirled around her, and she grasped onto the strongest one, the image of Jake running toward her with his arms wide open, exclaiming "Mommy." That single word broke the dam within her. "Jake!" she shouted again, her voice filled with unyielding strength. "I will fight for you. I won't let them take you." The shadows recoiled momentarily, sensing the hot flame of Sarah's determination. She stood, an eternal flicker of light against the encroaching dark, every ounce of her love and defiance flaring up like a beacon. "Come to me, Jake." With one desperate movement, she grasped the doll from the altar, its surface feeling eerily cold beneath her fingertips. In that instant, a vision surged forward, the memories of whirling laughter transformed into frozen echoes of what was once joyous. "Mommy, I'm scared," came the frightened whisper, drifting through the trees as though Jake was slipping further into shadow. Her heart shattered at the sound. "Do you choose to save him?" The shadows taunted, wrapping around her arms, seeking entry to her mind. "What will you sacrifice?" She took a deep breath, heart racing as the ground shifted beneath her. The true meaning behind the rules whispered in her ears. To free one is to bind another. "Then I'll bind myself," Sarah screamed, clutching the doll tightly. "I'll give myself to the darkness. Just let him go." In that moment of unyielding bravery, the shadows surged greedily, wrapping around her completely. A powerful whoosh of energy erupted as the swirling mass twisted, sucking her into a vortex of despair. Sarah felt her essence unraveling, but she clung tightly to her love for Jake. She would face the depths of the darkness itself if it meant she could see him smile again. As the shadows roared, ripping through her consciousness, she felt the tug of Jake's spirit pierce through the fabric of despair. A sudden brightness broke free, illuminating the clearing in a warmth she thought she had lost. "Mom!" Jake's voice rang with clarity, cutting through the fog. For a heartbeat, she could almost see him through the chaos, a shimmering light piercing the darkness. "All these years I've wanted to protect you," she cried, letting the last vestiges of fear surrender to fierce maternal instincts. The shadows screamed, their grasp ripping away, the light suffusing through the clearing, weaving between the trees and binding them in place. But then, in a final push, the shadows roared back, a monstrous wave of fury. Only one can escape, and there it was, the choice laid bare again, as if a knife had fallen from the sky. "No, I won't sacrifice you," she gasped, feeling jagged pieces of her heart crack as pain stung her mind. The shadows stirred, sensing her resolve shifting, with every ounce of strength surging forth. She willed the shadows away, feeling the tether to Jake strengthen with each pulse of light that engulfed them. "I choose love. I choose Jake." And then, with a blinding flash, a singular brilliance surged forth, consuming everything in a dazzling light. The shadows shrieked, dissolving into nothingness, dissipated by the raw power of a mother's love. The forest trembled, and for a heartbeat, Sarah felt free. Just like that, she stood back at the edge of the woods, the cabin looming silently, untouched and whole. And there, in her outstretched arms, was Jake, wide-eyed and innocent, smiling like the boy she had fought to save. "Mommy!" He laughed, breathless, his voice bright with life. Sarah collapsed to her knees, pulling him into her chest, enveloping him in an embrace that promised safety. The darkness was no longer her enemy. Instead, it served as a reminder her love had ruptured the curse that had attempted to claim them both. They had escaped the shadows of the past, but the road ahead was still uncertain. As they walked away from the cabin, a gentle breeze whispered through the trees, echoing the secrets of the once cursed woods. "Let us go home," Sarah said, knowing their real journey had just begun. And with that, hand in hand, they ventured toward the warmth of the dawn, leaving the haunted echoes behind forever. Now, if you've enjoyed this gripping conclusion, it's the moment to show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now, and help feed the algorithm with your support. I want to hear your thoughts. So flood the comments with your reactions and theories about this shocking ending. And don't wait even one more second, share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. True fans know how important it is to support our journey together.